Good morning. Hey, I would have been on here an hour ago, but Grayson needed to go out and we ended up walking. How far did we walk? 1.32 miles. He just needed to be out there. Well, that sun is coming in. You know what? As much as I love it and it makes the rainbows, I'm going to direct it another direction for a bit there. That'll make things easier to see. I wanted to be sure to get on here because I said that I would tell you, I would do the assessment for catastrophizing. So that is from the word catastrophe. Okay, catastrophizing is the tendency to make our problems into catastrophes. When you catastrophize, a small setback seems like a huge disaster. If you are a person who feels that your whole day is ruined if one specific thing goes wrong, you are catastrophizing. This cortex-based interpretation can result in a great deal of anxiety. But once you recognize it, you can take steps to reduce it. So here again are 8 statements that I'm going to read, and you keep track of how many you can relate with. You can say, ooh, I do that. And the more of them that you relate with, the more you tend to catastrophize. Why don't you want to do that? Well, one, it's not living in reality to imagine that everything that happens to you or everything that goes wrong is a catastrophe. And two, it ignites anxiety. And when I say it ignites anxiety, you may not feel anxious at the moment, but it can create a sort of an underlying level of anxiety in your life. I have a friend who used to share that when he was growing up, his father sort of always expected the worst, always expected that, whatever, well, his reaction would be, what now? Like, what's gone wrong now? What am I going to have to deal with now? What have you done now? What's broken now? What do we have to spend money on now? That was his outlook in life. Everything was like, Well, that creates a level of anxiety. Some people live with some people's anxiety level is down here. And there are other people whose anxiety level is up here. And there are some people who have a really high anxiety level. And the ways that we think, and actually the things that we say, because very often those are reflections of how we think, can cause our anxiety to increase or decrease. So listen to these. I often imagine the worst when I am thinking about how some situation might turn out. Well, I don't need to give you examples because I think that everybody has done that at some time or another. And good morning to everyone who's watching this morning. Thanks for joining me. Okay, here's another one. I can make a mountain out of a molehill. So, a mole is a little animal that burrows around underground, and you can tell you have moles sometimes if you have little holes or little hills in your lawn. They're not very big, but a mountain is big. So making a mountain into a molehill is when you've got a little situation and you handle it as if it's a huge, oh no, terrible situation. Oh golly, rainbows are coming. Well, after I'm done reading, I'll open the blinds a little more. People would think I am going crazy if they knew the awful thoughts that go through my mind. Have you ever thought that? You know, we all have awful thoughts that go through our minds sometimes, but are you entertaining them? Are you saying, well, come on in and sit down for a while. Let's have a cup of coffee together. You know, it's different if they go through from if you keep them there and keep thinking about them. I often feel as if I can't handle one more thing going wrong. When something doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, I find it difficult to cope. I admit that I overreact to problems that others would not consider so much of a concern. And, you know, well, let me read the rest of these and I'll go back to that and give you an example. Even a small setback, like being stopped for a traffic light, can infuriate me. Sometimes what begins as a small doubt in my mind becomes an overwhelming negative thought as I dwell on it. Okay, so if you could relate to many of those things, and I don't mean relate like, oh yeah, I've thought that before. If these are things that recur in your life frequently, if you tend to frequently have these kind of thoughts, then you may have a problem with catastrophizing. So if you agreed with many of these statements, you have a tendency to catastrophize and will benefit from cortex-based interventions, including thought stopping, cognitive restructuring, and mindfulness. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, I admit that I overreact to problems that others would not consider so much of a concern. Okay, so I'll give you an example. The first time, you know, dogs get stomach ailments a lot. I'll turn the blinds while I'm talking. And it's not unusual at all for a dog. Uh-oh. Okay, Grayson is sitting here and I can hear his stomach making all kinds of noises. Anyway, so, all right. The first time that he got a stomach ailment, I was just really upset. I didn't, you know, I wasn't upset. I was concerned. I didn't know what to do. It was kind of the focus of my whole day. You know, I took him to the vet and all that, but my whole day was focused on him as if I had a sick child. Then, the next time that he got a stomach ailment, I kind of dealt with it kind of straightforward, did what the vet told me the first time. And then the third time that he did, which was just a few days ago, you know, it wasn't a big deal. I said to myself, you know, these things happen. Dogs can easily, like, it's the most prevalent ailment for a dog to get, the most common ailment. I'm hearing all these stomach noises from him, which, you know, is gastrointestinal distress. So, you know, I just dealt with it the way the vet told me, and I wasn't like, oh no. So the first time, well, did I have a reason to overreact? Yeah, you know, he was new. I had just gotten him. You know, I was overly concerned. I didn't, of course, what went through my mind is, oh no, is this going to be a recurrent problem with him? Is there something more wrong with him than just an upset stomach? And, you know, now, since then, I've learned, no, you know, these things happen. I'm going to blow out the woodwick candles. And I just want to make sure that what I was hearing were his stomach noises and not the candles. Because, you know, if a dog's stomach is making all kinds of noises, that might mean, oop, hurry up and take me out. Because, can you hear that? I'm going to put the phone down near him. I'll talk down here on the floor near him. Hey, Grayson. Okay, did you hear that? Okay, I'm sure you must be able to hear that because he's going like that. So I'm going to sign off here. You know what? Think about the catastrophizing thing. If you can work through some of these thoughts, you know, by reasoning your way through them, then that's not a real big problem. But if you can't, it's something that you may need help with. Oh, golly. And tomorrow I will read to you about guilt and shame. I better run him outside. He's sitting here smiling, but I'll talk to you later. Hey, so I just re-listened to my video this morning about catastrophizing, and I wanted to clarify a few things. So, first of all, when I gave the example about Grayson and his gastrointestinal ailment, if I was really a catastrophizer, you know, what I would think, I probably would not improve with the second and third time that he got sick. You know, it would be like adding fuel to the fire. I would be thinking, oh no, he's sick again. And I would start to imagine all sorts of terrible outcomes. What if he has to have surgery? Oh no, where am I going to get the money? And, you know, I would end up imagining the worst possible outcome or circumstances. And I'd be spending time thinking about that. What a waste of time. My gosh, there's enough that I have to think about that's actually happening without inventing all kinds of stuff, right? But people who have a problem with catastrophizing have a tendency to always end up thinking in extremes. And, you know, so far I've shared about, let's see, worry and obsessions or obsessive thinking and, let's see, today was catastrophizing. What was yesterday? Oh my goodness. I can't think what yesterday was. But here, oh, perfectionism. What's wrong with me? Why can't I keep track of these things? Only 4 things. But even though I'm sharing about them as individual categories, none of these things happen in isolation. You know, for example, when I was just giving the little scenario with Grayson being sick, you know, then into that comes worry and sort of obsessive thinking. Because I kind of can't let go of the thoughts and they keep going over and over in my head. You know, so it's all kind of related, but it's not unusual to have one of those things be the most prominent problem. And again, you know, we all worry. We all have some obsessive thoughts. We all are perfectionists about certain things. We all, all right, see, this is something that happens to me as I've gotten older. If I get a little rattled or feel a little nervous, I worry that I'm going to forget something, or not worried, but I'm concerned I'm going to forget something. And sure enough, I can't remember what it was that I shared about today. It's so funny because when I was younger, if there was an emergency or if I was under pressure, well, I thought so clearly. But now that I'm older, it doesn't seem to work that way for me. And, you know, I've even had situations where, let's say I've been, I don't know, at a doctor's office or getting a driver's license or whatever, and they've said, okay, and, what's your zip code? And like, I could think of every zip code where I've ever lived, and I couldn't think of the one where I live now, or things like that. Interestingly, though, I have found that even young people, sometimes when they're under stress, have the same kind of problem. They can't think of what it is. So anyway, yeah, I was saying that we all have little bits of these things that come to the fore in our lives. But the point is that we don't want to be governed by these things. We don't want to turn every situation, we don't want every situation to be controlled by a particular way of dealing with it if it's not healthy. Like I shared with you about my grandmother and how any situation where it was possible for her to worry. Oh, and also catastrophize. Oh my goodness, what a good example for that. She would. Okay, so I shared with you about how her thinking that, if she knew anyone that was flying anywhere and she heard on the news about a plane crash, she was sure that was their plane. And her sons fought in World War II, one in the European theater, one in the Pacific theater. And she used to worry about them, and she claimed, and she probably believed this, that she did not sleep the whole time they were away at war. And you know how sometimes you'll wake up frequently during the night, you look at the clock, and your impression in the morning, especially if you don't feel well rested, is, oh, I was up all night. But in fact, you were up a few times and you slept in between those times. Well, obviously, she was not awake continuously for several years. She did sleep. And in fact, we know she did because when her youngest son came home from the war, it was, I think, very early in the morning or very late at night. I can't remember which. And he was knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell, and finally had to go to a neighbor's house and ask the neighbor to call her on the phone because she was so asleep she didn't hear him knocking and ringing the bell. So that's the woman who didn't sleep the whole time he was away fighting in the war. But see, that's where the problem is with having some of these unhealthy ways of dealing with things. If we're not really grounded in reality, then we start having other problems like, she believed that she didn't sleep all that time. And that's a worrisome thing. Oh my gosh, that can lead to being sick and all kinds of stuff. And it's like the situation that I shared about having a problem being with other people, like playing games, let's say, which for a lot of people, playing games in groups is a relaxing thing, but for me was an anxiety igniter. It was a real stressful situation. And what did that lead to? That led to me, staying away from people a lot and not getting together in groups and not being able to, just kick back and have fun, because that's important in your life. So anyway, I just thought I'd, share those few little thoughts. And I said that, when I've read these assessments, if you frequently have these sorts of things happen, you may need some counseling, or, you may need to deal with these things. If you only have them happen infrequently, not very often, you know what? Still try to deal with them in a realistic, healthy way so that they don't grow into bigger problems, or into problems, I should say. Because, like when I was concerned about Grayson the first time he got sick, it was reasonable to be concerned. I mean, I didn't if I had thought, oh golly, what if this is something serious and I end up having to, pay a lot of money for surgery, or this is some recurring problem, that's different than going, oh no, what if this is something serious? And he has to have surgery and I have to pay a whole lot of money. And then he's sick and he's, going to have all these treatments all the time. What have I gotten myself into? Do you see? Those are the same two, they sound like the same two thoughts, but in reality, each thought has a different focus, okay? The first one is reasonable and practical. You know, it's good sense, it's practical common sense to think, okay, what might I have to deal with here so that maybe I'll be a little prepared. But it's another thing to go, and get all upset and everything about something that hasn't happened and may not happen. So, you know, hopefully that'll be some help for y'all, and will explain and clarify a little bit some of the things I was talking about in the first video today about catastrophizing. I remembered it. But I had to rush things because Grayson's GI system was a little bit too noisy. He ate his breakfast and he's sleeping now, so hopefully he's going to be okay. I guess time will tell. Okay, I'll talk to you later.